Welcome, everybody, to the new NFIB Research Center podcast, Small Business by the Numbers. I'm Holly Wade, Executive Director of the Research Center, and I'm here with Peter Hansen, Director of Research and Policy Analysis. Peter and I will be co-hosting the podcast series, leading off discussions about the small business economy. As a self-admitted podcast nerd, I am so thrilled to start this new program where we regularly talk about everything related to small business. We'll discuss NFIB's monthly Small Business Economic Trends Survey and the latest results of other surveys related to small business operations that we publish throughout the year. We'll also talk to special guests periodically to further explore small business topics of interest. So I thought we would start off just with a little bit of background since this is our welcome podcast to the new series. And the Research Center itself has been around for a long time. It was established in 1976, and its mission is to promote a greater understanding of small businesses and the conditions that impact them. The Small Business Economic Trends Survey preceded the center, interestingly, by a few years when Bill Dunkelberg, NFIB's chief economist, started the series in 1973. We can't wait to have Bill join us on the podcast soon to talk through the monthly survey results, but also give us some background on the history of the survey. For myself, I've been with the Research Center for about 20 years, over 20 years at this point, and so most of my background has been tied to the study of small businesses. Peter Hansen is also here in the studio with me, podcast co-host and the newest member of the Research Center. Give a little bit of background on your experience, Peter.
Thanks, Holly. Great to be here. Peter Hansen, kind of an economist by training. I started work at the Federal Reserve Board. Then I switched over to a different trade association, one that represented the professional audiovisual sector. And what was really neat about that job was that it was very business and market research focused. So thinking about all the types of data that our government produces, that NFIB collects, and what that means for businesses. I'm really excited to bring that to the table. Newest at NFIB, so I've been here for about 20 weeks, just a little different from Holly, but I'm really excited to be taking on the perspective of the small business owner, thinking about what the complex economy, what the interesting times we live in mean for them.
Yes, and you also have background in podcast with your previous employer, and so you have the experience of doing this. This is my first time with this podcast series, but so looking at what you did at the Audiovisual Association, what are your expectations of our new podcast and what you learned from your previous experience with the podcast?
I'm always excited to chat with someone as experienced as you. You have this super rich experience with NFIB. You also bring kind of a policy background education-wise. So I think you really flesh out a part that is so important to small business, which is how government policy, whether it's regulation or tax, is affecting these day-to-day people who are trying to prosper.
Yes, there is no shortage of issues and topics to explore as far as what's impacting small businesses. And it changes over time. So we're in kind of a unique environment right now where, as you mentioned, there's still a lot of regulatory and tax issues on the state level. Thankfully, on a federal level, a lot of that has been taken off the table, especially with the made permanency of the 20% small business tax deduction. But, just general economic conditions, those shift over time and recently quite quickly. So whether it's a tight labor market or inflation pressures, things like that, look forward to exploring all those topics and further understanding how small business owners are adjusting their business, how they're thinking about growth possibilities in their business, and then also what the constraints are and how we see kind of broader shifts in economic conditions and what we would tend to expect their reaction to that. So a lot of topics. I'm looking forward to getting into it with our data, with external data, with our guests, our special guests that we'll be inviting to help us better understand these really important areas of discussion. But, could not be more thrilled that we're starting this podcast. We are excited for everybody to join us to exploring the dynamic and ever-changing small business economy. And I'm thrilled to have you as the co-host to join me in putting this all together. And I can't wait to see where this all takes us in talking about the small business economy and where they're going from here. Peter, any other final thoughts on our new podcast that we're launching?
Yeah, I think just two key strengths that NFIB offers to our potential listeners are, one, our time series of high-quality mail-based survey data goes back 53 years. I mean, that's incredible. That gives us lots of context for all of the modern issues, lots to compare our data to, which in an environment where there's increasingly a lot of private data, that's a strength that those sources really can't compare to. And then I think one other point that I would really want to emphasize is, you can bore yourself to tears. You can spend your entire life looking through a lot of super high-level aggregate data, government data. But when you start to get into a specific sector, a specific slice, you can often find really important economic trends that are missing, that are maybe just starting, like a new threat or a new opportunity. And I think that's one of the things that makes our small business specific data so special.
That's a really good point. Yes, and Bill Dunkelberg, our chief economist, started this survey, as you mentioned, 53 years ago. And it's the best tool that we have to talk about the small business economy. At that point, when he designed the survey questionnaire, there wasn't a whole lot available then to better understand what they were going through because, as we know, how small business owners adjust and deal with changing economic conditions are often very different from their larger counterparts. And so understanding that sector of the economy, which in aggregate is a huge component to our economy, and it is also the most dynamic of the economy as far as businesses go. So every month we have new data to better understand how they're operating their business, what their biggest challenges are. So it's a great database to work off of to better explain small business sector. And we're really fortunate to have this still part of NFIB and this insight into our members and the small business economy more generally.
And by the way, you said there wasn't any data other than NFIB back in the early 70s when our data came online. Even today, you're pretty starved for data on small businesses other than NFIB. Government aggregates don't break out by company size, and there are a few other people that try to produce some small business data, but there's not a lot out there, and they all have their limitations. So even till today, in 2025, with as much data as there is, the NFIB data is a special resource and one that really stands out to me as a researcher and I think to people throughout the community in terms of a unique insight into the backbone of the American economy.
Absolutely. And that's a great point because while there is more data, it's usually very specific to a certain area of business operation and mostly finance. And we have, thankfully, a very broad view of what small businesses are doing. And so we cover a myriad of operations, whether it's capital spending or sales or inventory. And, this has been incredibly helpful for us to understand the small business sector, especially lately when things are changing and economic conditions are changing rapidly, how those moving parts fit together and what the larger story is. Whereas if you look at kind of one specific area of small business operation, it is really challenging to get more overall view of kind of the health of the small business sector. I always say is the gift that keeps on giving as far as understanding the small business sector and getting a really comprehensive view of what it looks like in all the areas of operations of small business owners. And thanks to our members who keep filling out this survey and provide us with this really rich, valuable information every month. So we're very excited about this new opportunity to discuss small business and can't wait for you to join us.